All right, so welcome everybody to another Open Game Data Open Office Hours session. Just to give a sense of the Open Game Data community, we are an NSF-funded research incubator, bringing together a collective of researchers interested in the use of data generated in and around games to advance our scientific understanding of thinking, learning, and decision-making. And we have two primary goals. One has been to sort of compile collections of resources and best practices in this space and how to use database methods in games. And that's a lot of what these kinds of sessions are about. And then a long-term goal is to build a research infrastructure to support data-based research methods in games. We've got a number of resources that already exist. So there's the Open Game Data website hosted by Field Day Lab at University of Wisconsin, where you can see a bunch of examples of the kind of stuff we're trying to put together here. We have a Slack where we get together and talk about open game data ideas, schedule these sessions, things like that. And I can drop a link to that in a second. And then we have these open office hour sessions like the one you're attending right now. And so the way these sessions work, they're inspired by a series of sessions the Statistical Education Research Group used to do at CMU, where a person, usually a student, sometimes a postdoc, who had a problem with some research question, would go to a member of the stats faculty and essentially work with them as if it was office hours, but they do it publicly. So you could sit in the back of the room and you kind of get a sense for like, how do people think through this problem? What do they do? And it would start with like, here's my R code, and it would jump to like, what are you actually trying to accomplish? And walking back and kind of, it was so super helpful to see this kind of stuff happen in process. So we record these sessions and try to turn them into a resource for the community. A couple things to keep in mind: presenters are often showing work that is in progress publicly, and so keep in mind that that can kind of take courage and maybe consideration. Our goal is to kind of help the presenter usually achieve their goal and kind of understand what's going on, but also these sessions are about learning for everybody involved. So if you have a question, something you don't understand, feel free to raise a hand, ask a question, or if you have a suggestion to the presenter, you can also raise your hand and provide that. And with that, I'll hand off to Pragati, our speaker this week, or I guess our, I don't know, subject participant. We need to come up with the name of whatever that role is. But so Pragati is a very recent graduate of our Educational Technology and Applied Learning Science Master's program. And I just saw her capstone projects Monday and said, like, that's super cool. And would she be willing to share it with us? And so feel free to take over.
Yeah, I have not like edited my slide deck from the presentation. So I can like give a quick overview of what we did and then how we are using KC modeling within our game. So the game was basically about building an educational game to teach about entrepreneurship in rural India. So our client had like two major things that they wanted to address. One was like, oh, teach these basic business concepts, but also educate our users about drone technology or something like a tech-driven entrepreneurial idea. And then the next was that make students more motivated towards pursuing entrepreneurship as a career. So we were trying to balance those things, and in the process of balancing that, we like came up with a game which is very like reading heavy in a sense, but we came up with the idea of two dashboards to talk about these business skills and emphasizing some personal growth skills like risk taking, ethical decision making, and we also like have a history kind of a page where students log the decisions they're making in the game to keep track of at like the decisions, but also like reflect on them. And the actual gameplay is mostly like conversations that the students have with the AI. And we were kind of finding a way to make AI generate these conversations. So I'm going to like skip forward to how we went about our oh, too much content. Um, like learning development content. So we wanted to have the AI generate the conversations and personalize the feedback for each player, but at the same time wanted to have some kind of control on the way it was doing that. So we decided to have define these 22 knowledge components, which were linking to our specific game matrix we had 8, 4 for business and 4 for personal growth. And the way we defined our KCs was like, okay, one of the KCs is differentiate between fixed and variable cost in drone leasing. So if this particular KC is linked in the game with a matrix like revenue, we define these links to the AI, and we also defined the learning dependencies of each of the KC, that this one needs to go before, like 4 needs to be taught before 7, something like that. And we ended up grouping our KCs to form game goals. So the way that looked like was 3 different KCs linked to one goal. We had an AI prompt, like a very descriptive AI prompt, which we called the narrative seed. We gave that to the AI. It was generating scenarios for us. Each scenario had 3 decision points, where the student will see basically a multiple choice kind of a problem, and they had to pick a decision. We also decided to like control the way the AI was grading these, but the AI still had some kind of liberty, you can say, to pick which option went with which KC. It was just that each option was linked to 2 specific KCs, which were given to the goal. And there was always one most optimal option, one least optimal option. Students would pick the option, and then the AI would be generating the feedback for that particular decision and keeping track of whether the goal is met or not. And depending on whether the goal is met, uh, like if it's not met, there'd be a new scenario. If it's met, then the sequence basically ends and you go on to a different game goal. And that's basically how we've used KCs within our goal for grading. One other thing that we did was Monte Carlo player model, just to determine like our multipliers for each goal, for understanding basically which was the best kind of multiplier to make sure our students were meeting goal. But we also like so the way we built the model was we introduced a choice bias where we assumed that the student would pick 42, like the best option 42% of the time, worst option maybe only 8% of the time. And with that, we did our modeling. We came up with, I think we ran almost about, 10,000 tests. And we also defined a target win curve such that we didn't want the player to end a particular goal in just one scenario. We wanted them to at least go to scenario 2 to like practice more. And so we like introduced this win curve such that 0% of the time they're finishing the goal with the multiplier that we have in place, but 85% of the time the good players are finishing uh, by the end of scenario 3, and the extremely good ones who are like always making the most optimal choice are completing the scenario 65% of the time by the end of scenario 2. So yeah, that was basically what we did. I don't know if there are other things that you want me to go in detail of, Eric.
Yeah, I think something that might be helpful is the a little bit more into the maybe show an example of kind of a gameplay flow. I think you do have maybe a video or something of because I think it's one thing that's really interesting here is how you're using generative AI internally in this narrative choice game, but then also associating stuff to knowledge components on the
Yes.
yeah.
I can like do a demo of our game because we don't really have screenshots of a game flow, but I mean,
Sure.
okay, so this is supposed to be a mobile game. That's why you will be seeing the inspect element. You can ignore that. But yeah, this is the dashboard. So you can see like 3 of the 4 business matrices here. This is the personal page. So 4 more, but like only 2 get unlocked at the initial stage. So we have 5 that we'll be looking at. And once the gameplay starts, the first goal is basically to achieve a minimum of 16,500, customer satisfaction 17%, and like quality reputation 1 star. this is the scenario. So we do have like different characters in the game, which we've associated with our different uh, cases as well as our like game matrices. So if we are talking about revenue specifically, there's a game mentor who would be providing more feedback on revenue related things. But if there's customer satisfaction, which needs more focus, then there's a mentor, not a mentor, but there's like a person who is the voice of the customers who would keep coming in and giving feedback on that area. So yeah, this is the initial setup of a game scenario.
And
I
is this stuff already generated, or is this part of the narrative seed?
uh no, this is
Are
all generated by the AI.
okay.
The narrative seed just tells that you are an AI agent who is going to be like generating content or like generating scenarios for this kind of a gameplay, and we're defining these are our goals, this is the learning content description, so these are some topics that need to be touched on with one particular KC, and these are the three KCs that go in the goal, and then you take control from there. So that's what we're doing with the AI. And yeah, so this is like one example of a question. Would people in the Zoom want to provide an answer if they're interested in playing? Otherwise, I can like make a random guess.
Can you intuitively, as like the person that built it, tell which one of these is like the two positive?
Uh, no, the person who is playing like is not looking at the score, but they can definitely like tell that if you're reading there's a discount about farmers, then you can say that this is something that's supporting customer satisfaction. So maybe this is
Mm-hmm.
going to give me a plus in that
Right.
particular matrix.
But I'm curious about like you as the developer,
Mhm.
playing with this enough, do you kind of have an intuitive sense of which one it's chosen to be the two positive versus the two
Uh,
negative?
Sometimes
Uh,
yes, sometimes no. But we like when we did our testing the first time, even we were not sure like if the AI was doing this rightly, like correctly. So we did an rate reliability, and it turned out that it was doing the grading at least nicely because you can see
okay.
the scores here. So the first option
Okay.
was like a double minus.
Got it.
Um, Second
And so
option.
it's even a little bit, it's not even like a straight plus one, minus one. It's even kind of scalared a little bit.
Yes, it is. So each KC gets a score between -1 and +1.
Okay.
Yeah. And so yeah, you can see like for KC4 and 4 is mostly about revenue. So like if you're offering a discount, you're definitely like going to lose money. So that's why there's like a negative 0.3 there. And I'm forgetting what 10 was, but it was something about variable cost, fixed cost. So
Sure.
yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna
You have a
go
question,
with
Luke?
the most optimal, which would be option. So right now, 3 and 4 kind of seem same, but it's different cases. So there's also the thing that if in the game, maybe the player has enough revenue to meet the goal, but they don't have customer satisfaction, then they will have to like naturally incline towards an option which is more customer oriented. Okay.
So the
And
thing oh, go ahead.
yeah, no, I was just saying whatever feedback you'll read right now would be like focused on the option that has been selected. So like it's specifically going to be feedback related to the option selected and whether it's good or bad.
Did you have a question, Paul?
Yeah, I was curious about the background that players are coming into this with, um, and how much they know what these different terms mean. For me, not being an expert in this domain, when I see adopt a flexible pricing system, that response, it sounds to me almost like just make prices better to make people happier, and it almost seems devoid of meaningful decision content to me, but I'm not sure if that would be from somebody seeing it in that domain.
Yeah,
I'm curious, yeah, how much of that is domain, how much of that is LLM?
so students come in with a background in some kind of uh, like economics or business administration related courses. So they do understand some of these terms. And if they don't, we did introduce like a small, within the AI prompt, we tried to do this change where you saw a narrator at the start, which is basically setting up the context of the entire scenario. And we tried to make the narrator like give definitions of at least certain words which were new. And but we were having some glitches with it, so we kind of took that one off. And we are thinking of adding different kinds of help-seeking ways into the game, which is like the future direction where maybe the student can like while doing so when the prompt appears about the decision making, there can be like a help-seeking button where they can actually like raise a hand, ask definition for the word or something different. So we're like we were in future directions, we are exploring ways of scaffolding this information more because during testing we also realized that students who were coming in with this background of family business or like small scale businesses wanting to expand, or students who are coming in from backgrounds of economics and commerce fields had an understanding of these terms, what others did not, like those coming from STEM fields. So yeah, that has been a question from our users as well. And we were exploring ways to help scaffold that.
Very cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another mechanic I've seen in some similar games is there's like a dictionary of terms and like you can like click on a word and it'll bring you there. But those are usually in a fixed script game, and so it's actually like an extra challenge when it's generated. I suppose you could still have like a preset set of keywords and you would still find the keywords in the generation, but yeah, that's an interesting challenge.
Yeah, so we have given the keywords to the AI at least. Like I can show you our database. So when we have KC goals, KC metrics. So when we defined our KCs, it's not just like the name, but we also like provide some kind of description of keywords or terms to cover. And this has like, oh, cost price, selling price, these are things you need to cover, or market segmentation. And
Okay.
that's why we were trying to like make the narrator give the definition itself, but not while decision making, after decision making, because we are already giving multiple scenarios for students to practice. So yeah, but the AI was hallucinating a lot. Like it was giving the definition sometimes it was not. It was getting really tricky and we had limited time. So we were like, okay, let's keep this feature for later.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back. Yeah, and with it, that's basically how the game works. I'll like quickly go through 3 of these. I'm not sure if I picked the good option or not this time. Oh, no, did not. Yeah, so you can see like here the narrator actually defined it, but it did not define flexible pricing. So there was something about informal conversations, not sure. But
And here your ability to participate in the conversation is purely through these 4 decision points or 3
yeah,
decision. Yeah. So
yes. And with
but like
the
there could be maybe a user flow of like if there is a term you could click on it and there's a little like what does that mean, and then the character comes back.
yeah,
Something like that.
that's something we were thinking about. So the very first user testing, play testing that we did, we actually did not have options. We only had like an open, actually we had a mix. We had a mix where the student can like type and have conversation for like a few minutes. The AI would give open-ended questions, you can type your answers, and then whatever discussion you've had, based on that, there will be like an MCQ style question. But that open-ended conversation was going in multiple directions. Like people were just the most random questions. And we were like, we need
Right.
to control this. So
Yeah, I think it's a really clever way of putting some
mhm.
reins on a generator.
Yeah.
Is there any part of the game that's scripted, or is it all generated?
The part that's scripted is the goals, the content that needs to come into these conversations, and the cases. That's it. There was a point where we were thinking of scripting each and every scenario setup as well to keep it consistent. But with our testing, internal testings, and even the user testings, we realized that the amount of uh, controls or like barriers we've set for the AI, it is not providing too many different questions or like too much different content. Like the phrasing of this question might be slightly different, but the very first question is going to end up asking the exact same thing to all the users. And it's going to like change tracks or it's going to branch based on the user's uh, option selection. So then it gets branched, but at least the very first decision point is still pretty much the same for everyone. Yeah. And yep, so that's like a quick summary of what happened in goal one. That's very poor progress. Uh,
That's mostly because of picking random options.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so the log is basically what history is.
Mm.
You can see the breakdown of what happened at each decision level. So first one, I was at least like looking at the best option. Second and third were random, so you can see everything went down. And yeah, so that's just an area of reflection. This is also where we were helping to induce some kind of more information that students wanted to at least recall the other options they saw, because sometimes if they're confused, they're like, oh, what if I picked this other option? So
Mm.
doing that kind of modification here. So those were some of the next steps. But yeah, that's the
Cool.
game.
Um,
Sure.
yeah, another thing that I think would be interesting that I remember seeing in your presentation was you had kind of some results of you had like KC plots over time,
Yes.
and you had some cases where they converged and sometimes where they didn't. And I think there's some interesting nuance you
Yes.
have out of
So
those. Yeah.
we had different so this is individual case studies. So this is one gameplay.
Sure.
And for this particular student, they just strategized and focused on two cases and ignored KC4 entirely. So like after maybe like gameplay one, they were like, oh, I'm gonna like just focus on matching the local needs and picking up one of fixed and variable cost. And that's why their graph kept going
Mhm.
up for those two. But for like KC4, it went kind of down.
Mhm.
Then we had this other gameplay where we had like a player which was below average. So fluctuating a lot. Um, at one point, at least like for Blue as KC10, they were not adapting their services to match the local needs. They were only focusing on their revenue. So that graph kept going down consistently. And yeah, so we were looking at these trends. This was our best player because they showed the most learning in the sense that scenario one, they had one thing that was wrong. They improvised on it after looking at the log. Scenario two, they were like, oh, we know why this happened because they were like constantly reflecting. And then scenario three, everything went well. And there was like a constant shoot up. One thing with this particular case study was that this was a team play. It was two people playing on a same phone screen. So it was interesting that they were they were having these conversations where they were actually discussing why this might have happened, and it helped them reflect better in some sense. Like that's the assumption I have. So
Mhm.
their gameplay improved more than the others. But yeah.
Yeah, I think these are really interesting because like that first case, I
Mhm.
could see like if I'm rather than like maybe I'm not a first time entrepreneur, or maybe I'm not like immediately like this is my very first time ever thinking about it, but like maybe the thing that I really want to be thinking about improving for my business is like adapting services to local needs or something like that. And so like while you might think about from like a objective view, you might think all cases need to be maximized, but like maybe they don't. Maybe for an individual learner, I only care about some of them for my own individual learning, and it's okay for the other ones to not go down or go up. But that obviously would require some level of like onboarding or structuring or what like right
Yeah,
now it kind of assumes everything's supposed to go up.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and um,
Yeah,
but
because in
yeah.
this particular case, this person, like they only focused on two things and they were able to meet the goal
Hmm.
by the end of it. But our game's learning goal is that, oh, you need to learn to balance everything. So in
Right.
that sense, we can introduce mastery learning and be like, oh, we're going to give you specific practice to have that mindset where you're focusing on this one ignored KC as well. But
Hmm.
yeah, from an individual difference point, yeah, it makes total sense that people do this where they focus on one thing and they still achieve success.
Yeah. And to me, I think that actually highlights what could be a really interesting analytical challenge, thinking from like the open game data side of it all. How do you tell the difference between somebody who's not doing well in a third KC because they don't care about it versus somebody who's not doing well in a third KC because they don't understand it?
Yeah,
Uh, um,
that's true, but
and in like the kind of pure anonymous log data that we often see, that would be a real difficult problem to parse about. Do you have some thoughts, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just like thinking through that what's reflected here is ultimately like behavioral as opposed to like conceptual from like where the player is at with respect to the KCs, right? Because it looks like you've got a limited number of choices to make, and then each choice sort of has a couple, like each choice has a different set of KCs related to it.
Mhm.
Um, so it's like part of it's the data and part of it's just thinking through what can this like design tell us about conceptual understanding. Um, I could imagine something where that turns gameplay into homework where all of the answers are about a single concept, right? And then it's like, did they pick the good one or the bad one for KC set for the KC7 decision point? And that would probably help us get at the conceptual understanding more at the expense of like you're not really making choices anymore. You're just being tested on whether you know this thing. So that feels like the balance point to try and hit. And what Eric's saying about the analytic side of things is like
Yeah,
how does the design influence what we can pull from the decisions?
that's true. I mean, that was something we were also trying to balance, like not make it into a test and
Hmm.
keep it engaging because an initial idea we had where we did not introduce these constraints of there's always like one optimal choice, the plus plus and plus minus. We actually kept it more exploratory based where uh oh, there are these four options. Just pick one and see like where it's taking you. But then
Mm.
we're not able to capture learning per se. So we had
Mhm.
to introduce these restrictions to actually see if they can at least identify the most optional, like most optimal option or not. So
Yeah.
Were the players aware of the restriction? Did they know that one of the options was a plus plus and one
no,
of them wasn't? Okay,
no,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, because I could see also something like this, the pattern we see on the screen here, being if they thought that one of these things was just more important, and
Mhm.
so they were just always picking that, and it happened to go along with a minus for the other, that maybe they were just choosing to optimize something and thought everything was going to be a compromise plus minus anyways.
I mean,
Uh,
sometimes the feedback that they were getting from the AI would hint towards the fact that, oh, like in this round, maybe you can focus more on customer satisfaction. So they would, but at the same time, they were still like, because they also had two options, which were plus minus, plus minus. So they would still have to like weigh that whether they want to actually think of their revenue more or they would actually want to think of their customers more. If there's an option that's giving them both, So kind of by themselves thinking of that kind of a balance was the goal. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that might be interesting on that question of like choosing something because it's what you're aiming for versus choosing something because you like don't understand the choice you're making. Um, would be like I know in a lot of in some of the games at Field Day, especially Aqualab, like there's an argumentation mechanic where you sort of say, "Here's what I think and why," in some way.
Mhm.
So I think part of the interface showed like what's the customer satisfaction and what's the prices and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I wonder if letting a player make a choice and then make a prediction about here's how I think things will change
Mhm.
might be an interesting way to get at um, the like what's the understanding portion here behind um, like the decision points.
Right. Yeah, at least during user testing, I was doing it like myself, asking them why they made a particular choice. But yes,
Mhm.
we were thinking of trying to understand the reasoning as well and capture it somehow in the game. But yeah, we didn't want to take away the engagement element because it's already so reading heavy
Yep.
that you don't
Right.
want them to like type their answers and explain why. So approaching it from the engagement angle was also a little bit of a difficulty. Yeah.
I'm curious what you learned from those questions when you were asking them why you chose that. What did their reasoning line up with what the game or the model thought it should be in terms of like positives, negatives?
Uh, the reasoning was, yes, reasoning was lined up with weighing their pros and cons that, oh, like this particular option is giving me more money, but at the same time, if I end up giving like discounts, maybe I'm gonna lose some money, but I might gain more customers. So yeah, it was lined up in the plus minus area, and that was at least like a plus for us as like a team that okay, maybe we are capturing that in some sense. Um, but yes, there were also instances where they just did not understand the term, like you asked, oh, what's flexible pricing? And there were instances where they would be confused, and by the end of it, they would just say that, oh, I didn't pick this one because I did not understand what this was, but this one made more sense because I could at least understand what the pros and cons of it was. So there were those
Mhm.
instances, and that's why the whole idea of help seeking and implementing that within the game came through.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think another thing that's really interesting about this, like thinking about that, that's another kind of interesting case of like, how would you tell the difference between you picked this option because you thought it was best, or you picked this option because you didn't understand a term in the other one?
Mhm.
And telling the difference between those two through data, um, and kind of thinking about like from an open game data perspective, like how would we want to encode the log data coming out of this game? Kind of looking at Luke a little bit on this because that's what we've been talking about a lot. Is kind of like how are we structuring our specs and things, and how should open game data kind of come to an agreement on what gets recorded? Because one way you could do it, and this would be sort of the ITS form of doing this, so intelligent tutoring system, which uses KCs and things a lot, where you just recording those KC values changing. And that's one way of coming it. But then there you're kind of 100% trusting the LLM got it right.
Yeah.
And you're 100% trusting that the player understood all the text and made a rational decision.
Yeah.
And so instead, I think from an open game data perspective, we would probably want all of the dialogue, which sounds like a nightmare to scrape through and analyze.
Like dialogue from the user or dialogue from the AI?
Like the whole transcript, I think. And trying to think about like say this did like 100,000 players a month or something like that.
Mhm.
That's a lot of text.
It is. I mean, I think as much text as it is, like there's not a lot of interactions, so it might kind of balance out.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
But yeah, to try and do any kind of analysis that would go back and like parse through all of that would would be tricky.
Yeah.
But I could imagine applying like a layer of some kind of like sentiment analysis, something a little bit lighter than a full-on LLM, to sort of squish down some of that text in the analysis phase. Um, might make it a little bit easier to like dig in statistically than to try and do anything that would require a person to comprehend here's what all of this text meant at every point.
Yeah.
Um,
I actually like from a research perspective because I'm more interested on the research side of this project as well. I wanted to do the like look at that AI generated data as well and do analysis with it, but it was like from the project timeline wise, it was very hard to do, and we also were not recording all of the AI feedback being generated. So
Mm.
all the evidence I had was my users' feedback to say that, okay, what the AI is generating after my response is either in line with what I selected or it's giving me some slight hint towards the question that might be coming up. Those were the only two types of feedback that I got. But we, like, during the initial days of testing, we also ran into AI hallucination issues where the AI was mistaking the response to be some other option and then generating different feedback, which
Mm.
definitely hindered the learning. And I know my developer put in some checks to make sure that was not happening. And we like, I think day 2, day 3 of testing, we were much better off with that issue. But yeah, looking into that feedback data can definitely help us see if the AI is leading the player to pick a particular response or not, because that might have been the case as well. And we did not look into it.
In terms of capturing the whole transcript in order to interpret the
Mm.
graphs going up, and like, is this how much are we trusting the LLM for our data analysis? That seems like it would be a generic problem even for a not generated game, of like when a player makes a decision, what is it that they're responding to, and do we trust the mapping that either, in this case, the LLM, in traditional
Mm.
cases, the designer put in place to match those together. So how does open game data handle that problem with non-generated
Yeah.
games?
So Luke can maybe speak to this a bit more too, but we were recently talking about this problem actually maybe in like last time's open office hours or maybe a time ago. We may or not have recorded that discussion because sometimes we don't record the open sessions, but we were talking about a field that has a couple pretty narrative heavy games. Like Joe Wilder is one, Wake's got a lot of dialogue in it. And in that case, we were talking about how rather than logging a bunch of really heavy log messages where you're recording all of the text, you can just record an ID to a text tag, and then the system can like dump a database of text elements, and then you can match it up on the back end. You can't do that in a generated context, though. So in the generated context, you probably got to capture everything.
What?
But
Why
also,
not?
well, I don't know if you can. I mean, maybe if it was your proprietary LLM, maybe. I'm not going to trust that you can seed and get back something from OpenAI.
Of course, yeah.
But I think I've been seeing Jen pop in and out. I don't know if your mic is working. You might be able to speak also to some of the how we do the analysis, but also Luke could probably talk a bit about how we've been doing encoding.
Yeah, I can say like from the like pure technical side of things, um, capturing a bunch of dialogue lines has like surprisingly not even been close to like the heaviest thing. Like when we run into issues, it's because we like decided to log some underlying thing that changes more often than we thought. So you get like a gazillion starts and stops for some underlying thing that just ends up dwarfing the, here's what the dialogue looked like. From the like, how do you analyze that point of view? I think that's something that Jen's probably gotten into a lot more. The thing with having it, like having all of our stuff like pre-written, like the advantage is less about, oh, we could have this all like link up with IDs and stuff, and more about because everything is designed in a fixed with some fixed meaning, we usually have like if we know that a particular bit of text was trying to explain some concept, we can sort of analyze, here are the things that we're dealing with this concept. And so without getting into the specific textual details, usually when we're analyzing things like that, it's we're analyzing like a class of let's say all of the jobs in Aqualab that relate to this particular topic, or all of the in one of our games, Bloom, you're running an economy and you just constantly have people complaining at you about, I don't like this policy, I don't like that policy. And so we would look sort of across gameplay at how did you react to this particular kind of complaint without necessarily digging into what was the specific textual content. So there's sort of a question of when does the text content become useful or not, more so than like, can we capture it reasonably? But I would definitely be curious to hear Jen's perspective, because Jen, you do so much more of the qualitative stuff where the content of the text like matters fundamentally.
Jen. Nope. Still can't hear. Still no. So I can give at least a little bit. Everybody, nope, still not hearing. So Jen recently talked to us about a bunch of text replay stuff she's been doing, where you can do qualitative coding over. You essentially take like a log file or a transcript of the game, and you turn it into sort of simpler textual descriptions of what was happening. Yep, here you know. Cool.
Bizarre. Okay. It apparently just doesn't like me having headphones. Fine. Yeah, so I am curious, like, yeah, my phone was jumping in and out earlier. When you are talking about the LLM giving feedback and like that you don't have the text for that, what kind of settings were you using? Like, how variable were the responses to the prompts in the first place? Because like I'm thinking about, for example, like temperature settings you can get really consistent results where like you at least kind of know what it was likely saying, even if you haven't had it logged.
So the initial setup was pretty similar. The variability came after the first decision was made based on branching. But if like there are multiple players who are making same decision, we would still see like less variability in those compared to students making more like different decisions. But yeah, the variability keeps increasing by the time you reach third decision point, because it's changing sequentially, right? Like you picked option 1 for decision 1, then you picked option 3 for decision 2. By that time, you are in a completely different branch compared to somebody else.
I think I'd be fascinated to see, and I know this is a master's project for a client project, and so it's a little bit different from what we would normally do if you were like a PhD student, but a data set from this game played even a bit longitudinally. Because like I bet everybody's first, like you were saying, the first scenario is pretty similar for everybody, but like 15 scenarios on, is everybody in a completely different universe at one point? And then how do you deal with that in a data context? Like, because like a thing you'd often see in a more traditional branching narrative game is like there can be branching, but then like the designer pulls it back, and it's like a lot of sort of scalloping structure. The LLM doesn't have to do that. And I'd be curious to see if it keeps going, does it just keep diverging, or do they come back to each other at some point?
Yeah, I feel like we wanted to reduce that diverging. That's why we set up goals. So every goal kind of set, or like my assumption is it sets everyone at a similar point. But the thing is, the new design, which is not in the developed version, like right now, all the goals are open and people can start from anywhere. The new design or the final product design was such that you need to do goal 1 before you can go on to doing goal 2. And in a scenario like that, yes, there might be people who would be in a completely different universe. But yes, if they're starting from any point or any goal, then every goal puts them at like a similar starting point at least. And then they can only diverge only up to 3 scenarios, which is 9 decision points. So that is. Yeah, there were a lot of things that I myself wanted to explore from a research perspective, and we were limited with time, team understanding, efforts, a lot of things. But yeah, that's the reason why I want to like pursue this project further, because this is something we built from the scratch. So our client only has IP wise or usage wise, like they get all of our code, and then after this they can do whatever they want to do with it. We can do whatever we want to do with it. So that's like an interesting and like a good thing for us, I guess, to do more with this. So yeah.
I think it would be super cool to, looking at Luke and Dave, who will watch the recording, a technique like this, replicating the Joe Wilder character narrative study. You'd have to totally rebuild Joe Wilder because the LLM blows the whole thing up anyway. But like that same, so the Joe Wilder study is one of the earlier open game data projects where essentially we looked at manipulating the script of this game, checking if what if the character's snarkier, or what if the character doesn't like history and it's a history game. And Dave's intuition is like you want a character that's more relatable to the kids. So it's kind of snarkier, it's kind of doesn't like history, it's kind of, whereas the funder was like, no, we want like a sort of a goody two shoes, super into the subject matter kind of character. Turns out the funder was right. It's more or less the outcome of the study. But it, like doing that kind of thing with a technique like this would be really interesting. And seeing if you could like lean narratives in certain ways. So yeah, I don't know if Field Day is looking to build a new thing, but
Maybe I should take this project to field day after when I reach Wisconsin. Yeah.
In terms of making the corpus of transcript tractable for data storage and analysis, one thing that I've seen as a strategy for, you were mentioning that, Eric, that when a person is writing a branching narrative, they can bring it back. One strategy that I've seen for caching LLM responses, like to reduce API calls, is if you have a prompt that's similar to a prompt you've seen before, if it's similar enough, you can just retrieve the old response. I could imagine something like this, because there's some finite combinatorics, maybe large, but that you could record as you generate a response. If it's new enough, you cache it. But if you are going to generate a response and it's close enough to something that you've seen before, just grab the old thing. At that point, after people have gone through enough scenarios, the total corpus of text in this game would saturate, which might make it more tractable kind of in the database. Also, in terms of qualitative coding, I'm a quantitative guy at heart, but I've been doing a lot of qualitative coding and automated qualitative coding in my recent work. And that's something where I've been taking kind of human text and labeling it. Those labels could on their own be a very rich way to store the data for analysis, just storing codes rather than the full text. But because you're generating the responses, you could even do it the other way around, of generate the set of codes and then tell it to generate text based on those codes. that might be even more consistent and avoid kind of mislabeling issues of going from text to coding. But Jen, I'm curious, you see like you had
That's
your reaction to
exactly
that.
actually what I was thinking there too, is that we've played around a little bit in the center here, thinking about like just automated data sets, because often they're trying to help folks figure out if the model that they made is telling the story that they anticipated, or even just having like random sample data sets for people who are learning quantitative ethnography. So like having, okay, we want this like particular set of codes, they should appear in this way, and then having AI kind of generate some data sets just for people to explore is a thing you can do. In the same way, I'm wondering if it would help with that problem to be able to have the, like you're saying, the responses just automatically labeled as they're being generated. Because they're giving feedback in a particular way that is based on the prompt and the way that you're thinking about it anyways, to have those labels pre-assigned. And then if you're just storing those, there's probably a validation process that would have to take place ahead of time just to make sure that those labels are getting accurately assigned, and making sure that you have everything kind of in agreement with human coders, or however you're kind of finding validity in those labels. But I think that that would make it a lot easier, because at the end of the day, unless you really want to be able to report like the full narrative somewhere, which you can get examples of, what you're really more concerned with is how these like essential labels are occurring in the text that the game is producing.
And I think
And
you're kind of getting it a little bit with how the KCs are integrated into the model, or into the flow.
And maybe having like some, not just the KCs, but like how is the LLM actually trying to integrate them? So I think like Luke brought up sentiment analysis, like that's one thing, like how is it affect wise trying to integrate them? Is it, a direct like pointing towards something, or is it more subtle? Is it trying to explain something? Is it, I could see there being other types of labels or codes that are not just this is the content of the post, but the how is the LLM trying to interact.
like content plus hint or content plus correction or some of those different sorts of things that it did. Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, but I need to hop onto a different call.
Sure, yeah, we're coming up on time.
This was a super fun conversation. I really liked a lot of things that came up, and those were some questions I was wondering myself and wanted to like move around things, experiment with it. So thank you so much, Eric,
Yeah.
for inviting.
Yeah,
And
thanks so much for sharing.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Super awesome project. As everybody was saying in the actual, my microphone was broken during the actual capstone presentation, so I couldn't say. It's like super impressive for the the quality of product you guys did and the time you had. Is super awesome, and I think it would be super cool to see this go more places. I think lots of people in this community would be super into that. So.
Definitely. I mean, I might take a break at least for the month of August, but I'll start thinking of ways to like do more with this
Definitely.
project.
Mhm.
If I can talk to someone in field day as well, who'd be like interested in the data for the game, I'd be interested because I'd be in Wisconsin in August. So,
Sure.
Cool. All right, thank you.
okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Pragati.
See you all.
Great to meet you all.
Yeah. And so I'm gonna follow up and see. So our next session will be Jen at the Serious Play Conference. I need to double check that we can actually put the public Zoom up while we're there. I will try to endeavor, at the very least, I'll try to record. So if we don't see you all in 2 weeks, we'll probably see you 2 weeks after, and then look out on the Slack for a new scheduling thing for when we're getting into fall semester.
That was good.
But in the meantime, see y'all next
Right.
time.
See you at Serious Play.